Humanity was a species born from the ashes of their own past, crawling out of the wreckage of countless wars, environmental crises, and conflicts. The galaxy, vast and ancient, was filled with civilizations far older and far more powerful than humanity's young species. When humans first sent their ships into the stars, they did so with a mixture of hope, curiosity, and unshakable belief in their survival. No one in the galaxy paid them much mind at first, dismissing them as nothing more than a curious, fragile species, just beginning to learn how to navigate the cosmos. They were considered the galaxy's newest, weakest species, their future uncertain. On Earth, humanity had struggled for centuries to overcome their own internal strife. They had fought wars over land, resources, and power. They had torn their world apart with weapons of unimaginable destruction. But through it all, humanity had never lost the one thing that had kept them going: hope. It was this same hope that pushed them to venture out into space, to look beyond their own world, to explore, and to conquer the unknown. This determination was ingrained in their very bones, an indomitable spirit that could never be snuffed out. When they first encountered the stars, they were not met with kindness. Far from it. The first few encounters with other species were disastrous. Human ships, still small and fragile compared to the grand war fleets of other galactic empires, were often treated with contempt. They were ignored or dismissed. The human representatives, eager to make contact, were often met with cold stares or outright hostility. But the humans didn't back down. They learned quickly, adapting to the galaxy's rules. When one race shut their doors, the humans sought another way in. They negotiated, they learned the languages of distant worlds, they made allies where others would have given up. Every time they were knocked down, they got back up. The human spirit caught the attention of those who had underestimated them. It was a quiet, subtle force that rippled across the galaxy. They didn't just fight with weapons. They'd fought with their minds, with their hearts, and with their perseverance. The galaxy, filled with species that had existed for millennia, soon found themselves perplexed by this tiny species, barely older than infants compared to many of the others. Yet it wasn't their size or their military prowess that made humans dangerous. It was their ability to adapt, to grow, and to change in ways no one had anticipated. A Zygrax scout ship, unassuming, a product of an empire that had crushed countless civilizations, was the first to learn this truth firsthand. The Zygrax had been known for their brutal conquests, their bloodthirsty nature, and their predatory instincts. They were accustomed to easy victories, to crushing their enemies without resistance. But when they made contact with the humans, they expected nothing more than an easy target. What they didn't realize was that humans, despite their physical weakness, had the uncanny ability to outthink their enemies. The first interaction with humanity was brief. A Zygrax scout ship approached Earth, expecting the swift invasion, only to find a group of humans who had already analyzed their technology and developed an early warning system. Within days, Earth's leadership had already responded. Rather than fighting with brute force, humanity began to use diplomacy. They understood the value of information, the importance of communication. By the time the Zygrax had even begun to mobilize, humans had learned their language, studied their weapons, and mapped their weaknesses. The Zygrax were stunned. This tiny species, barely advanced beyond their home planet, had not only repelled their initial attack, but had done so with intellect and cunning. This wasn't the battle they had anticipated. They had been used to crushing civilizations under their boot, but humanity didn't play by their rules. No one had warned the Zygrax that humans could think like this, that they would choose to survive and use everything at their disposal to do so. Humanity had survived its own self-inflicted catastrophes, and now it was ready to face the stars. The humans had no grand military empire, no galactic war fleets, no centuries-old cultures of domination, but they had something more dangerous, a will to survive, and a relentless drive to learn. The Zygrax would come to regret their decision to underestimate humanity. Little did they know, this was just the beginning. Humanity's strength didn't lie in their sheer firepower alone, nor in their ability to wage war. It wasn't in their massive fleets or armies, because they didn't have either. What made them truly formidable was the way they adapted, the way they integrated warfare into the very fabric of their society. The humans understood that survival wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about being prepared, no matter who you were. The human military, though still young, was built differently than any other in the galaxy. There were no professional soldiers with exclusive training. Everyone, from a scientist in a laboratory to a chef in a bustling restaurant, was taught how to fight. In every human community, regardless of status, occupation, or age, basic combat training was mandatory. But it wasn't just physical combat. It was about strategy, resourcefulness, and quick thinking. Every human was encouraged to develop a blend of practical skills. Farmers knew how to defend their homesteads with makeshift weapons. Teachers understood tactical planning, often using their classrooms to simulate battles. Engineers worked not just on infrastructure, but on building tools of war, designing defensive mechanisms that could be adapted to any situation. Even children were taught the value of resilience, of survival, of thinking on their feet. While many species in the galaxy were born from war, bred for combat, their lives defined by the sword, humans had a different perspective. To them, every profession, every life, was a form of warfare. A society built on creativity and adaptability was one that thrived, no matter the environment, no matter the challenge. The warriors of humanity weren't just battle-hardened soldiers. They were civilians, engineers, doctors, and laborers who had learned the art of survival. This ability to blend everyday life with the potential for combat made the humans unpredictable. One day, a group of civilians could be found in a bustling city, going about their daily business. The next, they could become a makeshift militia, defending their homes from an unexpected attack. The Zygrax, and other species watching from the sidelines, found it hard to understand how humanity could be so capable and versatile, especially when they seemed to have no natural advantages. The key was their mentality. Every human saw themselves as both a civilian and a warrior. It wasn't about a separate identity for soldiers or farmers. It was the understanding that anyone could be called to fight at any moment. This mindset made humans dangerous in ways that no one expected. Where other species were built around rigid hierarchies and specialized roles, humans blurred the lines. The strength of humanity wasn't in any one individual, but in their collective resilience and adaptability. Their approach to war was equally unique. Where other species relied on specialized weapons or superior strength, humans fought with intelligence, leveraging their diverse skill sets to outthink their enemies. A human soldier might not have the raw power of the Zygrax, but they knew how to use the terrain to their advantage, how to think ahead, how to anticipate the next move. It wasn't brute force that defined them. It was the ability to outsmart, outmaneuver, and above all, to survive. Every human, from the smallest child to the eldest elder, understood this one universal truth. They could be called upon at any moment to defend their species, their homes, and their way of life. It was this philosophy that kept humanity strong, no matter how many more advanced civilizations they encountered. And it was this approach that soon began to send shockwaves across the galaxy. As the humans continued their journey into the stars, they became known not just for their ability to survive, but for the audacity of their very existence. In a universe where the strong ruled and the weak were crushed, humanity proved that it didn't need to be the strongest to be the most dangerous. Their strength was in their adaptability, in their relentless drive to push forward, to learn, and to fight back when all seemed lost. And so, with every world they visited, every new civilization they encountered, the humans began to weave a reputation that would soon make their name feared across the galaxy. A species of civilians and warriors, blending the mundane with the extraordinary, forever changing the rules of survival. When the Zygrax made their first move, humanity was still in its infancy on the galactic stage. The humans had only just begun to stretch their reach beyond their home planet. But the Zygrax, ruthless conquerors who had swept through numerous star systems with fire and blood, saw Earth as a simple prime target for their expanding empire. They sent a scout ship to make a brief observation, unsure of what they would encounter. What they found, however, was far from what they had expected. The Zygrax were used to conquest, to fear. They encountered species that cowered before their might, begging for mercy when they entered a system. For the Zygrax, diplomacy was a foreign concept. They didn't negotiate. They took. But when they arrived at Earth, they found themselves confronted with something utterly unfamiliar. A species that didn't yield, that refused to bow or submit. The humans didn't understand the brutal ways of the Zygrax, but they did understand one thing: survival. At first, the humans were unaware of the looming threat. Their scientists had detected the alien ship's approach, but they assumed it was a simple case of exploration or an unintended collision. The first signs of the Zygrax came as a signal, a cryptic transmission, distorted by the distance, but unmistakably alien. Earth's scientists, initially baffled, began to decode the transmission. When the message was finally understood, it was clear: a demand. The Zygrax had arrived to claim Earth. At first, the human government was divided. Some urged for a peaceful resolution, a diplomatic approach, while others feared the worst, a brutal invasion of their home. The humans, unfamiliar with the ways of galactic conquerors, found themselves in a tense standoff. But in this moment of uncertainty, something remarkable happened. A collective resolve began to form. Rather than reacting with panic or fear, humanity's leaders opted for a strategy that was uniquely human. They would engage the Zygrax, not with threats, but with diplomacy and intelligence. The Zygrax assumed that humans would bow to their overwhelming power. Instead, Earth's top minds came together, blending science, communication, and strategy. They cracked the Zygrax language and established an open line of communication. What began as a hostile demand quickly transformed into an exchange, a negotiation of sorts. The humans, far from intimidated, began to study their invaders, learning everything they could about the Zygrax's technologies, their culture, their history. The Zygrax, meanwhile, were stunned by the humans' ability to adapt and learn so rapidly. Their initial assumptions about humanity's inferiority were slowly chipped away. But diplomacy wasn't enough. The Zygrax soon realized that the humans' words had a sharper edge than their weapons. The human strength was in their minds, their ability to understand and outthink their enemies. Human negotiators, though outnumbered and outmatched technologically, used their cunning and insight to turn the tables. While the Zygrax focused on their brute force, humans focused on tactics, on strategy. They understood that an army could be defeated not just by its size, but by its organization, its weaknesses. And it was in these very weaknesses that the humans saw their opening. For the first time in their history, the Zygrax found themselves stalled, not by force of arms, but by the cleverness of an enemy they had long dismissed as insignificant. They realized that the humans weren't simply stubborn or foolish. They were resourceful, quick-witted, and relentless in their pursuit of survival. And this was the spark of something far more dangerous to the Zygrax than any physical weapon, a challenge to their belief in their own invincibility. As the standoff continued, the Zygrax grew more agitated, eager to bring their overwhelming power to bear. Yet the humans didn't falter. They slowly built a network of alliances, sending emissaries to neighboring star systems. They shared their knowledge, not just of their technology, but of the ways in which they had survived time and again. They spoke of their wars, their history, their determination to rise above the ashes of their own mistakes. And with each word, they subtly forged alliances, ones that would prove crucial in the days to come. The Zygrax underestimated the humans not just in terms of military strength, but in their unity. The humans had no empire, no vast army at their disposal. They had something more powerful, a collective will to survive, and a tenacity that would not break. Their first encounter with the Zygrax had been a clash of civilizations, a battle of wills, and humanity had shown that it would not be crushed. The Zygrax might have had the numbers and the firepower, but they learned quickly that when it came to humanity, they were facing an enemy they had never encountered before, a species that fought not just with weapons, but with everything they were, every mind, every individual. And it was in this very difference that the first seeds of fear began to take root in the hearts of the Zygrax. The Zygrax had underestimated humanity once more, and this time, they would pay a terrible price. The invasion of New Callum, a bustling human colony located on a planet in a distant star system, was meant to be a swift and decisive strike. The Zygrax believed they could crush the humans with their superior firepower and overwhelming numbers. They had done it countless times before, conquered worlds without much effort. But New Callum was different. The humans there weren't just settlers. They were survivors, hardened by years of self-sufficiency, skilled in combat, and bound by an unbreakable resolve to protect their home. The Zygrax landed their forces with the usual brutality. Their warships descended from the skies like a swarm of locusts, blotting out the sun and raining destruction upon the planet. They expected the humans to panic, to retreat or surrender without a fight. But instead, they encountered a unified front. The residents of New Callum, civilians all, had already prepared. A tight-knit community of engineers, farmers, teachers, doctors, and traders, they had long known the possibility of an attack. The humans had spent years building not just their homes, but a network of defensive structures, hidden in plain sight, waiting for this moment. As the Zygrax descended, they were met with the unexpected resistance. The humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like their very existence depended on it, which of course it did. Makeshift barricades were set up within hours, roads were mined, and ambushes were laid. Farmers armed with homemade weapons joined forces with engineers who had turned their skills to designing traps and fortified positions. Even the children, trained in basic survival tactics, helped in ways they could, guiding families to safety, relaying messages, and offering assistance in evacuations. Every human on New Callum had a role to play, and they all understood the stakes. This was more than just a fight for their home. It was a fight for the future of humanity. As the battle raged on, the Zygrax began to realize they were facing something they hadn't anticipated. A species that didn't know how to give up. The humans were relentless. The Zygrax's initial bombardments didn't break their spirits. Instead, they fueled their determination. The civilians turned fighters used the terrain to their advantage, exploiting every natural feature of the planet, from dense forests to high mountain passes. The humans, though fewer in number, used guerrilla tactics to harry the Zygrax, launching hit-and-run attacks from hidden positions. The Zygrax, for all their strength, found themselves caught in a web of traps and surprises. They were not used to fighting against an enemy that didn't fight fair, that didn't simply meet them head-on. The humans didn't engage in conventional warfare. They turned their knowledge of their environment into their greatest weapon. Civilians who had no formal military training became experts in psychological warfare, playing on the Zygrax's fear and uncertainty. The humans did not just strike physically. They wore down their enemies mentally, making every step forward feel like an eternity, every victory hollow. The turning point came when the Zygrax warlord, Cath the Ravager, ordered a full-scale assault on the colony's central command. What they didn't know was that the humans had laid their most dangerous trap there. The humans had already infiltrated key areas of Zygrax communication and command structures, planting sabotage devices in vital systems. Just as the Zygrax forces thought they had broken through the defenses, they found themselves suddenly cut off, their communications scrambled, and their weapons disabled. The humans struck at their most vulnerable point, their leadership. Under cover of night, small teams of elite human fighters, made up of former soldiers, engineers, and scientists, infiltrated the heart of the Zygrax base. With silent precision, they eliminated key leaders, cut down supply lines, and sowed chaos among the invading forces. The Zygrax, unable to maintain their cohesion, were forced into disarray. When morning came, the Zygrax realized the full extent of their defeat. The humans had not only repelled them, but had done so in a way that left the Zygrax reeling. The Battle of New Callum wasn't just a victory for humanity. It was a statement. It wasn't about firepower or numbers. It was about unity, preparation, and the sheer will to survive. The Zygrax had come expecting an easy conquest. What they found was a species that had learned from its past mistakes and had turned those lessons into something formidable. The cost was heavy, as battles often are, but the people of New Callum stood tall. The Zygrax forces had been shattered, forced to retreat, their numbers decimated, and in the aftermath of the battle, humanity's reputation began to spread. They had proven something to the galaxy. They were no longer a species to be ignored. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Zygrax had learned the hard way that humans didn't simply survive. They fought for their right to exist, no matter the odds. And in doing so, they had sent a message to the galaxy. Humanity was here to stay. The victory at New Callum had been more than just a military win for humanity. It had become a symbol, a beacon of resilience that would echo throughout the galaxy. The Zygrax, once certain of their dominance over the galaxy, now found themselves questioning their place in the grand cosmic order. The humans had not only stood their ground, they had turned the tables on the mightiest conquerors the galaxy had ever seen, and in doing so, they had earned the respect of countless species, including those who had once dismissed them as insignificant. The news of New Callum's victory spread like wildfire across the stars. It wasn't just a story of military triumph. It was a story of a species unyielding in the face of overwhelming odds. Broadcasts from New Callum showed not only the remnants of battlefields but the humans themselves, civilians who had picked up arms and fought not for glory, but for their homes, their families, and their future. This was the strength of humanity. They didn't need to be the biggest or the strongest, but they had a remarkable ability to unite in the face of danger and to adapt to any challenge that came their way. The first to take notice were the other colonies spread throughout the galaxy. Many of them had been under the shadow of the Zygrax for years, living in constant fear of their brutal raids. The news from New Callum gave them a glimmer of hope, a realization that perhaps they too could stand up against the Zygrax. And so, slowly but surely, these colonies began to form their own alliances with humanity, offering resources, information, and support. The humans' victory had sparked something, an awakening that had not been seen for generations. At the same time, the Zygrax Empire was in turmoil. Their leadership, once confident in their ability to subjugate any world they chose, began to fracture. Warlords bickered among themselves, unsure of how to respond to the defeat. The Zygrax military, long a symbol of unrelenting power, found itself in disarray. They had underestimated the humans, and now had to reckon with the reality that they were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. The Zygrax Empire, once feared, now had a new enemy, a species whose strength didn't lie in raw power, but in intelligence, unity, and an unwavering will to survive. But it wasn't just the Zygrax that had been shaken by humanity's resilience. The galactic powers that had once ignored the humans or dismissed them as a fleeting curiosity were now paying attention. The humans had proven their worth in the most decisive of ways. Even the larger, more established civilizations that had watched the Zygrax's conquests with indifference were now considering the implications of a human presence in the galaxy. Some began to see the humans as potential allies, while others, threatened by the unexpected rise of this new power, began to view them as rivals. In the wake of New Callum's victory, humanity began to expand its influence, not through brute force or domination, but through cooperation and diplomacy. They reached out to species they had previously encountered, offering aid, trade, and knowledge. Humans had learned from their past mistakes. They understood the value of peaceful coexistence, and while they still remained vigilant, ready to defend their home, They saw the importance of building relationships that would strengthen them not just in the present, but for the future. But even as they worked to strengthen their position, humanity knew that this victory was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and their enemies were many. The Zygrax were only one of many dangers lurking in the shadows, and it was only a matter of time before others took notice of humanity's rise. For the humans, there could be no complacency. They had earned their place in the stars, but they would need to continue adapting, continue growing, to ensure their survival. The victory at New Callum was a turning point, but it was also a reminder that the fight for survival was never truly over. As humanity's influence spread, new challenges arose, new threats, new enemies, and new alliances. Yet one thing was certain: the humans would face whatever came their way with the same resolve that had won them New Callum. They had proven to the galaxy that they could survive against the odds. And now, they would prove that they could thrive. In the weeks following the victory at New Callum, humanity's presence in the galaxy had become undeniable. What had once been a scattered, relatively unknown species had suddenly transformed into a symbol of resistance and hope. The Zygrax, their confidence shattered, retreated to lick their wounds, while other species began to take stock of the humans and the power they had displayed. No longer dismissed as a fledgling species, humanity had sparked a fire that was quickly spreading throughout the galaxy. The humans, wise from their experience, knew that New Callum's success was not simply a matter of military might. It was about unity, strategy, and the willingness to fight for their survival. And as they expanded their reach, they knew that to secure their future, they needed allies. They could not afford to fight every battle alone. The first to extend a hand of alliance were the Vrel, a peaceful race of engineers whose technological prowess was unmatched. They had been watching humanity with growing curiosity and had been impressed by how quickly the humans had adapted to the realities of space warfare. While the Vrel were not naturally inclined toward conflict, they saw in humanity a potential for something greater, something that could tip the balance of power in the galaxy. And so, they offered their assistance, providing humanity with advanced technological support, from weapon systems to energy shields, all while encouraging peaceful diplomatic efforts with other species. Other races, once cautious or even hostile toward humanity, began to take a similar approach. The Gorn, a species of telepathic warriors, had long valued strength and conquest. But after hearing the stories of the humans' victory, they began to see something more. They saw a species that had turned a desperate situation into a triumph, and they were intrigued by the humans' ability to unite disparate groups into a single force. The Gorn were not swayed easily, but they saw potential in forming an alliance with humanity, not because they sought peace, but because they understood that the universe was a better place when all sides were strong. Perhaps the most unexpected ally was the Mwraith, a race of insectoid diplomats and traders known for their ruthlessness in business. The Mwraith had long remained neutral, believing that war between the galaxy's powers was bad for business. But their neutrality began to erode when they saw that the humans were rapidly becoming a power in their own right, one that could no longer be ignored. It wasn't the military power of humanity that caught their attention, but rather their adaptability and strategic vision. The Mwraith recognized that the humans' ability to turn adversity into opportunity mirrored their own business practices. They saw in humanity a chance to gain an advantage in the ever-shifting dynamics of the galaxy. The coalition, as it came to be known, began to form quietly at first. Its founding was not marked by grand declarations or epic speeches. Rather, it was a slow, organic process, with representatives from each species quietly meeting on neutral ground, building trust, and discussing common goals. They recognized that the galaxy had become a far more dangerous place, and if they were to survive the coming storms, they needed each other. The coalition's central tenet was simple: unity in diversity. Each species brought something unique to the table, whether it was technology, military strength, intelligence, or diplomacy. Together, they could create a force that could rival even the most powerful empires in the galaxy. However, not all species saw the coalition's formation as a positive development. The Zygrax, wounded by their defeat, began to stir in the shadows, rallying their remaining forces and calling for vengeance. Their leaders had grown paranoid, consumed by the need to prove their superiority. The defeat at New Callum had been a blow to their pride, and the Zygrax were not a species that took insults lightly. They began to regroup, seeking new allies of their own, preparing for a final confrontation with the humans and their newfound coalition. Other galactic empires, including the dominant Voshari, also watched with interest. The Voshari had long considered themselves the supreme rulers of the galaxy, but the rise of the coalition presented a threat to their hegemony. They began to weigh their options carefully, trying to decide whether to crush this new alliance before it grew too powerful or to join forces with humanity in a bid to ensure the balance of power remained in their favor. As the coalition began to grow, humanity's place in the galaxy shifted. What had once been a species on the fringes, a small and largely insignificant presence, was now a key player in galactic affairs. The humans had proven that they could adapt to the most dire of circumstances and emerge victorious. Now they had to prove that they could maintain their newfound position and navigate the complex web of galactic politics and power dynamics. The rise of the coalition was just the beginning. As tensions escalated and alliances shifted, humanity would need to rely on more than just military strength. They would need to wield their greatest asset, their ability to adapt, to think outside the box, and to form alliances where others saw only enemies. The galaxy was watching, and humanity's next steps would determine whether they would thrive or fall. The stakes had never been higher. As the coalition grew stronger, so did the desperation of the Zygrax. Humiliated by their loss at New Callum, the once feared empire had retreated into isolation, licking its wounds and rebuilding. The Zygrax leadership, unable to accept defeat, shifted their focus from rebuilding their army to rallying the galaxy's most ruthless and war-hungry factions. To them, humanity was not just a threat to be eliminated. It was a symbol of defiance that must be crushed for the sake of their pride and survival. Their leaders, particularly Kath the Ravager, were consumed with one singular goal: revenge. Kath, once a celebrated warlord, had become a figure of rage and obsession. His failure on New Callum gnawed at him, haunting every decision he made. Under his orders, the Zygrax forces began gathering allies, mercenary factions, disgruntled empires, and pirate clans from the far reaches of the galaxy, all driven by a thirst for power or destruction. These forces, previously scattered and unorganized, were brought under Kath's banner, forming a new coalition that rivaled the coalition of humanity. It wasn't just the Zygrax Empire that had felt the sting of humanity's resilience. As the coalition solidified and expanded, the balance of power across the galaxy began to shift. The Voshari, once the galaxy's ruling power, began to feel their dominance threatened. They had watched as humanity made its mark, winning allies and gaining respect, and their own position was no longer as secure as it once had been. Aware of the growing strength of the human-led coalition, the Voshari found themselves at a crossroads. Some of their leaders, seeing an opportunity to ally with the humans and assert control over their own empire, sought to engage diplomatically. Others, however, saw the coalition as a growing threat that needed to be suppressed before it could grow too powerful. The situation grew even more complicated as the Zygrax formed a new alliance with the ruthless Tuvar, a race of cybernetic conquerors who had been silent for centuries. The Tuvar had been a lost power, their fleets scattered across the galaxy, but under the guidance of the Zygrax, they were rapidly rebuilt into an unstoppable force. They brought with them advanced technology, including neural-linked warships capable of devastating precision strikes. Their combined forces posed a terrifying challenge to the coalition, whose members, though unified, were still working to merge their vastly different cultures, technologies, and agendas. Humanity, for its part, knew the threat the Zygrax posed was not just military, it was psychological. The Zygrax were not simply a warlike species. They were cunning, ruthless, and willing to sacrifice anything for victory. The scars of New Callum's victory were still fresh, but humanity understood that the Zygrax were learning from their mistakes. The humans had to act quickly and decisively to ensure that the Zygrax would not be allowed to rebuild their empire into something far more dangerous. The coalition's leaders convened to address the growing crisis. Diplomats, strategists, and military leaders gathered in the heart of human space, where the capital world of Elysium had become the de facto center of the new Galactic Alliance. Plans were drawn up, alliances solidified, and every possible resource was poured into preparing for what was to come. The War Council knew they were facing an enemy with unmatched aggression and growing strength. But humanity had something that the Zygrax and their allies could not understand: resilience, ingenuity, and a relentless drive to protect their future. The coalition's first move was one of diplomacy. Leaders from humanity reached out to the Vosheri, the Mraith, and even the Gorn, seeking to secure their support before the Zygrax could rally their forces. Though some species were still wary of the humans, many saw the writing on the wall. The Zygrax were a threat not just to humanity, but to every species that stood in their way. If the Zygrax succeeded, the galaxy would fall back into the hands of tyranny and war, and many races would be forced into submission once again. But diplomacy was not enough. As the Zygrax and their newfound allies readied for war, the coalition began building its military defenses. The humans had learned from their previous victories, refining their tactics and integrating the technology they had received from their allies. The Vrel contributed advanced energy weapons and shield technology, while the Gorn shared their expertise in combat strategy and telepathic warfare. The Mraith, though not fighters by nature, provided invaluable intelligence networks that monitored Zygrax movements across the galaxy. Even with these advantages, humanity knew that the fight ahead would not be easy. The Zygrax were determined to erase the stain of defeat, and their new alliance was formidable. But the humans had proven time and again that they would not be easily cowed. The Zygrax might have their warships and overwhelming firepower, but the humans had something far more potent: an unbreakable will to survive and a shared belief that the future of the galaxy could be different. As tensions mounted, it became clear that the stage was set for an epic confrontation, one that would determine the fate of the galaxy itself. Would the coalition's unity be enough to overcome the might of the Zygrax resurgence? Or would the galaxy fall into the hands of a ruthless empire bent on domination? The time for answers was fast approaching, and the galaxy held its breath as the two forces prepared for the ultimate clash. The galaxy stood on the edge of a knife. The coalition, a fragile but determined alliance of species, had been preparing for this moment ever since the Zygrax resurgence began. Humanity, alongside their new allies, had united their resources, their military forces, and their resolve. They knew that the coming conflict would not just decide the fate of New Callum, or even the fate of humanity. It would determine the future of the galaxy itself. The Zygrax, their pride wounded and their armies bolstered, had become a force unlike any the galaxy had seen in generations. The war began in earnest as the Zygrax launched a multi-pronged assault, their fleets spreading across key galactic sectors. Their combined forces, now reinforced by the Tivar's cybernetic technology and the warbands of mercenaries they had gathered, moved swiftly and ruthlessly. Their first target, the heart of the coalition, human space, particularly the capital world of Elysium. Cath the Ravager, now fully focused on revenge, aimed to strike quickly, hoping to break the morale of the coalition by raising the symbol of their unity. But the coalition was ready. The defenses of Elysium had been fortified beyond anything the Zygrax could have imagined. Every inch of the planet was prepared for the assault, from planetary shields to orbital defense platforms, and human ingenuity was evident at every turn. The humans, with the help of their allies, had built a network of hidden weapons systems, traps, and countermeasures, ensuring that the Zygrax would not have an easy victory. The first wave of Zygrax warships, expecting a quick triumph, was repelled with surprising force. But the battle had only begun. As the war raged on across the galaxy, the Coalition's forces proved their worth in ways that astonished the Zygrax. The Vrel's energy weapons cut through the Zygrax warships with deadly precision, while the Gorn's telepathic warriors disrupted enemy communications and sent entire units into disarray. The Mwraith's intelligence networks provided constant updates on Zygrax troop movements, enabling the Coalition's military to anticipate every maneuver the enemy made. Meanwhile, humanity's tactics, born from years of surviving the most hostile environments, became the cornerstone of the Coalition's strategy. On the ground, the battle for Elysium was intense. Humanity's forces, bolstered by the ingenuity and resourcefulness of their allies, turned every battle into a test of endurance and adaptability. The Zygrax had their numbers, their sheer ferocity, and their overwhelming firepower, but the humans, once again, demonstrated their ability to outthink and outblast their foes. Civilians turned soldiers fought alongside professional warriors, creating a synergy unlike anything the Zygrax had ever seen. However, the battle was not without its costs. As the war progressed, the Coalition's forces found themselves stretched thin, with many battles taking place on multiple fronts. The Zygrax, relentless in their pursuit of victory, pushed deeper into Coalition space, launching attacks against undefended planets, raiding supply lines, and targeting key installations. The Coalition had no choice but to fight on multiple fronts, and every victory was hard-earned. Yet humanity's resilience never faltered. They had been pushed to the brink before and had come out victorious. They would do it again. It all came to a head when the Zygrax launched their final assault. A massive fleet, led by Kath himself, descended upon Elysium's atmosphere. They had one goal: to obliterate the planet's defenses, to break the Coalition, and to demonstrate to the galaxy that the Zygrax were still the undisputed masters of space. But the Coalition was not going to let that happen. The final battle was fought in the skies above Elysium. The Coalition's forces, now fully united and coordinated, met the Zygrax head-on in a colossal clash of metal and fire. Humanity's ships, outfitted with the latest technology from their allies, flew alongside Vrel energy vessels, Gorn warships, and Wraith stealth fighters. The air was thick with fire, laser beams cutting through the void, explosions lighting up the blackness of space. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos, each move calculated, each fighter knowing their role. The tide of battle turned when Kikath, in his flagship, the Ravager's Pride, engaged in direct combat with the Coalition's top commanders, humanity's greatest military minds, leaders who had fought side by side with civilians, directed the fleets with unmatched precision, outmaneuvering the Zygrax at every turn. But Kikath was a relentless adversary, and he would not go down easily. It took every ounce of humanity's strategic brilliance, along with the combined might of the Coalition, to finally bring the Zygrax warlord to his knees. The final blow came when a coordinated strike, led by human pilots, using tactics learned from their years of survival and guerrilla warfare, breached the Ravager's Pride. The ship was shattered, its once mighty hull torn apart by a series of precision strikes. Kikath, the symbol of Zygrax tyranny, was dead, and with him, the last of the Zygrax's central command fell. With Kikath's death, the Zygrax forces began to unravel. Without their leader, they were scattered, their unity lost. The remnants of the Zygrax fleet, demoralized and leaderless, fled into the far reaches of space. The war, which had seemed so unwinnable only months earlier, was over. The Coalition had emerged victorious. As the dust settled and the survivors of the battle counted their losses, one thing was clear: humanity had not only survived, they had changed the galaxy. The victory at Elysium sent a message to every corner of the stars: humanity and its allies would no longer be pushed aside. They had earned their place among the great powers of the galaxy, not through domination, but through resilience, ingenuity, and unity. the galaxy would never be the same again.